Welcome back to my channel, everyone. My name is Kaylina and I am the Hex Witch, and today I've got some book reviews for you. They are mostly witchy books with a couple others scattered in. I've got some nonfiction and fiction, so we are going to dive right in. So my first book that I've got for you is not really a witchy story. It's more about the paranormal. It is Ghost Eaters by Clay McLeod Chapman. This is what it looks like. This book had very low-key creepy vibes. The descriptions and stuff were creepy, but maybe not like super scary. But it definitely has this underlining sense of dread when it comes to addiction, and that is a big theme that kind of radiates throughout this book is addiction and what it does to people. And in this case, the addiction is with a drug known as Ghost. And Erin, we follow our main character. She loses her boyfriend, or ex-boyfriend Silas, to an overdose, and so desperate to get some closure with him because things don't end exactly great, she agrees to take this drug called Ghost. This allows her to see different ghosts, and not always in the form that, not just Silas. She sees a bunch of soul-sucking kind of ghosts that pretty much want her energy, and she kind of is all of a sudden in her whole world is not what it once was. And so following her through this story and trying to get this closure with her ex-boyfriend, who was a little reckless and not always the best guy. So it's a very interesting read. Definitely has, you don't realize quite the effect of it on you until like the very end, and not to spoil or anything, but the very end was finally when I had that aha moment of, oh my gosh, this is actually pretty frightening, because addiction is a very real thing, and even though it's with a fake drug in this, you realize that people who fight addiction, it's this constant battle, and to not give into it is scary. And this book definitely kind of faces that, and this dreading thought of that you're never truly free from addiction is definitely a theme that they explore within this book. And just the obsessiveness of wanting something so badly that you would do anything to get it. That also shows up a lot in this book. I would probably give this a 4.3 out of 5 stars. I wish the atmosphere was a little bit more in depth and a little bit creepier, because it definitely had the potential to do so. But at the end, you definitely understand this underlying creepiness that I knew was the theme throughout the book, but it really hits you right at the end. So I would definitely recommend it. It's a good book. I enjoyed it. On to the next book. So this one is The Odd Sisters by Serena Valentino. This is a series of books. I believe there are 9 of them now that follow the different Disney villains. In this one, you follow 3 odd sisters, and then you also follow Snow White as well as Circe, who is the daughter of the 3 odd sisters. And you kind of get the background of their story and how they came to be. And it kind of follows all the different fairies of the Disney kingdom, I guess you could say. So like Maleficent, Ursula, I guess she's more of a sea witch. I guess it follows the fairies and the witches. And so you get to know kind of the history behind them and why they are the way they are today, and that maybe not everything is what it seems. So I would have enjoyed this book a lot more had I read the books in order. So I didn't realize that these books have an order to them, and they do. So make sure you look at the order before reading them, because it definitely was talking about things that probably happened in books prior, and so I was a little bit lost. But that has nothing to do with the book. It has everything to do with me not looking into the order of it. So these are quick little reads. They're fun little reads. I always love kind of a new take on fairy tales, especially anything Disney related. So I definitely have some of the other ones of this series. My mom gave me these for my birthday, and so I will definitely be reading the other ones. I did read the Beast one before, and I really liked that one. That one was really good. It follows Gaston and the Beast and kind of their history, their backstory that we didn't actually know about. And so it was very interesting to read about them and kind of their relationship before the story of Beauty and the Beast that we know today. So definitely recommend these. These are fun little reads if you're just looking for something, you know, quick, easy, lighthearted. I would recommend these. The next one I have, and if you follow any of the other booky people on YouTube, like Ashley, you may have heard of some of these books already. She has done some reviews on these, but I definitely love her recommendations and have read a couple of them that she's recommended as well. So if you have heard of these, sorry, they might be, a couple of them might be repeats. But the next one on the list is The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. In this, we follow our main protagonist. She lives in a very much Puritan world where she is a witch, kind of an outcast, finding her way. She finds this journal from her mother and gets involved with these witches that have passed on that live in this creepy forest, and she gets into some trouble with that, and they kind of want to avenge themselves from this town, and so that kind of comes into play, as well as her trying to find her way and how her magic kind of comes to be. I didn't realize the witches were bad in this. Like, I was kind of expecting them to be good. I don't know why, but I just did. So it kind of threw me off guard that it was the witches were actually bad. But it's a really good book. I really liked it. I would give it 4.8 out of 5 stars. I'll read the back so you know a little bit about what, even more so what it's about. In the lands of Bethel, where the prophet's world is law, Emmanuel Moore's very existence is blasphemy. Her mother's union with an outsider of a different race cast her once proud family into disgrace. So Emmanuel does her best to worship the Father, follow holy protocol, and lead a life of submission, devotion, and absolute conformity, like all the other women in the settlement. The mishap lures her into the forbidden dark woods surrounding Bethel, where the first prophet once chased and killed 4 powerful witches. Their spirits are still lurking there, and they bestow a gift on Emmanuel, the journal of her dead mother, who Emmanuel is shocked to learn once sought sanctuary in the wood. Fascinated by the secrets in the diary, Emmanuel finds herself struggling to understand how her mother could have consorted with the witches. But when she begins to learn grim truths about the church and its history, she realizes the true threat to Bethel is its own darkness, and she starts to understand that if Bethel is to change, it must begin with her. So you definitely get the theme of, you know, men kind of trying to overpower women, women having this constant struggle of fighting against that without getting in trouble. So that is definitely an underlining theme, which for some reason I always like a good witchy story where the woman prevails over the men that are trying to keep her down. Not that I have any issues with guys, but I always love a good feminist story, and this was definitely up there. So give that one a go if you're into witchy reads. The next one that I have here, which has tons and tons of great ratings on it, as well as Ashley also read this one and enjoyed it too. This one is Slewfoot by Brum, and this is a really good book. This is really an interesting story. It follows our main protagonist, Abatha, who she is a witch. She's got powers. Her husband dies. She's trying to live on her own, but of course in this village, men very much so rule the roost, so to speak, and so she's constantly struggling with fitting in with society, as she is kind of an outcast. She does not fit in. She originally was not from like a Puritan city, so she does not follow the rules very well, and that gets her into some trouble, and she has very few allies, and kind of how she goes above and beyond everything that is happening to her to survive and to prove herself that she's worthy of everything she wants. You also see her magic kind of come into play, and there's also this creature that is, everyone thinks the devil has come to town. And this creature has amnesia of sorts, and he does not remember who he is, what he is, and what he does, as well as some other creepy little critters that kind of follow him around. There's very much an undertone of protecting nature in this, which I really like, and realizing that, and it's not like preachy. It's not like in a preachy way where you're like, oh gosh, here we go again. We've heard all this before. But just the understated of how we are one with nature, and how, you know, humans, we tend to come in and destroy things, you know, and everything that we touch. And we have to be aware of the impact that we make on these things. And so I found that kind of a nice theme throughout it as well, without being like too in your face about it. But really enjoyed this book. It has some beautiful artwork that he has done himself throughout it, and each chapter also has a little piece of artwork that he's done, but the imagery is really pretty in it. And it's just it's a cool book. It's a really cool story. I really enjoyed it. I would give this one 5 out of 5 stars. Definitely was rooting for Abatha, as well as our other main character that had amnesia. Okay, onward. The next series, it is a series, a trilogy actually, that I've been reading, is the Cahill Witch Chronicles, and this is by Jessica Spotswood. The first one is called Born Wicked, and the second one is Starcursed. I just finished this one. And then there's a third one called Sister's Fate. I really enjoy these books. So, like, these books follow the 3 Cahill sisters. We follow the eldest sister, but there's Mara, Tess, and then Kate. Kate is the oldest one. And we follow kind of Kate's perspective. But these 3 girls are witches. They have to kind of hide their powers within society because there is something called the Brotherhood, in which they kind of rule everybody. And they are very, very strict. They don't let women do certain things. And as the series progresses, it gets even worse. And so they're really kind of oppressing the women there, making them like the worst out of the worst. Like, you must be obedient, you must be simple-minded, you must not be intelligent, you must only follow the Lord, all these kinds of things. Like, men rule over you and you must accept that. Like, crazy ridiculous rules that you're just like, it just makes you mad reading about it. And some of these things that the men say in this book is just ridiculous. Like, you're like, it's just really, why? So I really enjoy these books. You follow these 3 girls who have pretty much grown up thinking that magic is bad, it's horrible. Kate has a very specific power that involves mind magic, where she can manipulate people to do things, but she's always been taught that it's a very bad thing to do. So she kind of struggles with that. This book has kind of like a little women feel to it, in the fact that you follow the 3 sisters, and they're very close, at least at the beginning of the series. And it's just got this very nice feel to it. But then at the same time, like, as you read farther into it, you have the Brotherhood and the Sisterhood. And so the Sisterhood, they have their own secrets that you find out relatively fast about. But it almost kind of has like American Horror Story Coven feel to it, where you have this like sisterhood of witches, and but without quite the horror aspect. It's not quite as dark. There are some dark parts in it, but not. It's more just descriptions of what is happening to these women. There isn't exactly any like super dark scenes of it directly happening. You just find out about these things later. So I would definitely rate these probably 4.5 stars. I really do enjoy them. I really would recommend them as a read. The only thing that I wish I wish there would be a little bit more action. So like in each book, or at least so far, you're kind of rising up to the main part or the very end where the conflict is supposed to be rising the most. And the books, at least the first one, I mean, yes, something like bad happened, but it wasn't quite as intense as I was hoping it would be. Like you get all the way to this point, and then it kind of fell a little short for me, just a little bit. The second one was a little bit better with the ending, just because it came as kind of a shock as to what happened. But I'm really hoping the third book is full tilt ahead. We get a lot of action. We've been building up through the first two books on this war that's probably about to happen, and so I hope there's just a lot of action, a lot of stuff happening in it. So we will see, but I do really enjoy this book. The other thing that kind of bothers me, and this is super petty, this is really petty, but it for some reason just bothers me a little bit. These books, so they're like set in the late 1800s, like 1897 I think is when the second book is taking place. And the fashion was, very specific back then, and the book covers, the fashion does not fit the time. And that's not even something against the author, that's something of whoever did the covers. Like this is not 1800s fashion. This little dress, so the covers look very modern, and it's supposed to be in like periods. So that is the only thing that kind of bothers me, is just because, and of course I don't care, I love things that take place in older times, but like make sure when you're doing the research and designing the covers that it matches with the fashion and style that was of the times. The writing matches up just fine, but the covers do not. And so it just kind of bothers me a little bit. Like I said, it's kind of a petty thing, and I would not have that prevent you from reading the books. They're really good books. I really enjoy them. They're really fast reads. The chapters aren't too long. I really like the characters. There's a character in here that is just going to make you want to pull your hair out because they're just so frustrating. But it's all part of leading up to this big ending solution in the third book. So definitely give these a go. I really enjoyed them, really liked them. That is all for the fictions. So now we're going to go into some of the witchy reads that I've been reading in the nonfiction. And the first two I want to talk about, let's grab this one. These two I'm going to kind of talk about together just because I would definitely consider these kind of more like beginner books, but they're also just really good books to have on your shelf if you ever need to go back and refer to different witchy stuff that has a bunch of different witch stuff within it. And the first one is The Witch of the Forest Guide to Natural Magic. And this is what it looks like. And these I actually got on sale at Barnes & Noble. They're relatively, I think they're there quite often if you want to just go and get them. I think they're like $10 a piece. But this is kind of a beginner's guide, but it has a lot in it. So it has, the basics of getting started. It has the Wheel of the Year in it and kind of like information regarding the Wheel of the Year. The moon, spells, witchcraft in the broom closet, because I know some people cannot fully express their witchcraft to everybody. Some people are not comfortable doing that due to other religion, or just it's not, popular amongst family and friends, and I totally understand that. So it has a section on that. It has a section on sigils and herbs and divination. So it's just a really nice little book that has a lot of things laid out within it. Talks about the difference between Wicca and witchcraft, and some spells in here and types of spells. Common mistakes that can be made, like intention, the moon, and it also has some nice like pictures and stuff in here to go along with it. Like it even gives like what I like, a tarot card reading for each of the different holidays of the Wheel of the Year. So this is just a nice little comprehensive book of a lot of different things. So I just kind of appreciated that, having that on my shelf, and it gives just basic ideas. If you practicing yourself, you definitely develop your own way of doing things. Witchcraft is not set in stone. It's very much find what works for you and go forward from there. But if you need just something to reference, this is a good book for that. And it, or if you're just feeling lazy and you don't really want to think of a bunch of rituals that you want to do yourself, this is a good jumping off point that you can reference. So I enjoyed this book. I definitely would give it a go if you're just wanting something to reference. Then you have The Witch's Complete Guide to Self-Care by Theodosia Cornith. And this book I also really liked. This book was just, when you're going through a phase and you're just like, I just need to focus on self-care and what can I do, and you want to add a little bit of witchiness to it, this book is really good for that. And it's just, it sorts out different ways of self-care that you can do, that if you're a witch and you practice witchcraft, it talks about like different herbal allies that you can use and their meanings and what they can bring to you, and cleansing baths, and it talks about the wheel of the year again. It talks about different aspects of nature that you can use to kind of help heal yourself. It talks about the moon phases and how you can use those to incorporate your magic, and what each moon phase means and where you may be at during each phase of the moon. Goal setting and manifestation, like, and honoring your intuition and just listening to your inner voice inside you. Talks about daily meditation, which I've been trying to get better at. Like, we're getting there. We're getting there, but there are some days it doesn't happen. And it also has a whole section on like intuitive tools and different divination things and spells. I believe it gives like a whole section on like astrology, as well as which I do find astrology very interesting, because if you feel like you're kind of drawn to being a certain way, that's probably true. That doesn't mean you're set in stone and you can never change and evolve, but knowing your natal chart really helps know kind of how you may handle things. Knowing what houses things are in may explain why you react to certain things or react a certain way. And so that can just be really helpful if you are just kind of wanting to know your background and why you may have certain tendencies. So it goes into all of that. It does have a whole section on tarot and just kind of brief meanings of what each tarot cards mean and what they represent when they show up in a reading, which I love tarot. Tarot is probably one of my favorite divination practices to do, because it gives a very, like, you can intuit it yourself, but each card also has a meaning. And so it just can give a pretty clear outline of what's going on in your life and maybe give you some advice as to areas that you need to focus on or areas that you need to change. So I really do enjoy tarot and continually learning more about that. It also gives a couple layouts that you can do for tarot as well. So those are in there. It talks some about space and different energy stuff. And I feel like when us as witches, we do like to examine a space and feeling the energy, and when we're in a space that feels very comfortable, we thrive. But when we're in a space that is very chaotic and negative feeling, we don't, and we get kind of swamped and drugged down by it. So it's important to know energy and what we can do to kind of maybe lift the mood of a space. And so it talks about cleansing your space and different things you can do for that. Different herbs that you can use, like lemon, as well as like music and emotional clearing. Talks about some cooking with different herbs, different teas. I also love how it talks about familiars and like animals. Animals, at least for me, and I feel like for a lot of witchy type people, they're very healing to us. And as we know, animals vibrate on a higher vibration than us, but they also have this uncanny ability to, connect with us on such a deeper level. And so animals can really help when you're feeling down, and they can be a big part of self-care. Unless you have a little stinker like my dog, and then maybe it's a different story. I still love him to death, but he is a pain in my patootie. It also talks about maybe just getting support from other like-minded people, even if whether you're in a specific coven or not, just finding different groups of people that can identify with you. And I find this can be kind of tricky because I hate to say it, not every group, but a lot of groups on Facebook or, they can just be very negative. And I don't understand that because as spiritual practitioners, we're trying to aim to vibrate at a higher level, and I just feel like a lot of those groups put people down. It's like, as a spiritual person, we're supposed to be open to all works of life, all people's opinions. We don't have to always agree with them, but as a whole, we're supposed to be open-minded and encouraging of people. And some of those like Facebook groups, they're so negative, and I don't understand it because we're all trying to learn together. We don't have solid proof of anything, but some of those groups can just be very disheartening. So just finding like-minded people. I know it's important to I know for me, trying to find people that are like-minded and who I can have more in-depth conversations with is always a constant struggle because, I mean, everybody gets to their higher vibration on their own pace, but there's not a lot of people that out there, I feel like, who are really wanting to go into in-depth conversations about the world we live in. So just finding support in that, because otherwise it can feel kind of lonely. It also talks about not being afraid to kind of be alone, even though I just got finished talking about not feeling lonely. But sometimes you do need your alone time. You need your own sacred space where you can go and you can just collect your thoughts. You can read a nice book. You can just have quiet time to meditate where you're not always swamped by people. Because regardless of if you realize you're doing it or not, it's very easy to take in other people's energy. And so you need time just to reset your own body. And not be afraid to be alone. You don't always have to have someone present there with you. There is joyfulness in solitude as well. And then lastly, at the end, it just kind of has different things that you can use to put on your altars. So, your crystals, your different pictures and images, inscriptions of things. Just preparing a sacred space for you to be able to do your spell work in. And then it has some spells at the end, which I don't usually use a lot of spells, but I usually just come up with my own, do what I feel I want to do. But these are nice little simple spells that will get the job done. So that's a good book. Sorry, that was way longer than I anticipated talking about that, but I do love self-care, and I think it's very, very important for everybody to do that for themselves, because the world can be a little bit dark sometimes, and yes, we have supportive people in our lives, but we have to care about ourselves too. Next, I want to talk about The Realm of the Ancestors in Slavic Tradition and Haitian Voodoo, by Natasha Helvin. As you can see, I don't know if you can see it, but this book, I have tons of tabs. So this was a couple months ago. I read a couple of these books on different ancestor stuff because I want to start getting into that. Obviously, I was, not obviously, you guys wouldn't know this, but I was adopted from Russia when I was like only about a year old. And so I know I have all this Russian ancestry that I don't even know about. And so I want to start deep diving into that more and kind of know my roots and history from Russia. as well as, I have my ancestors that I feel like watch over me from my family now. But this book, just kind of deep diving into Slavic tradition, is, I think, one of the best ways you can kind of learn about your heritage is reading about it and kind of incorporating it into your life as best as you can. And so this book was really interesting. It has just a ton of really useful information. I mean, if you're not one of those two religions, this may not be the book for you, but it talks about pagan Christianity and kind of the duality of those, as well as some of the battles that we tend to have, and how it's kind of segregated. Um, Ancestors for Slavic pagans, our roots, family system, energy flow in the family, energy vampires, location of the ancestors, and points of contact in Slavic tradition. It all begins with the ancestors, which is so true. We would not be here today if it wasn't for our ancestors. So keeping them in our minds and our hearts, I feel like, is really important, and kind of honoring them because they got us to where we are today. Um, the different generations of like clans and how they might affect you. Pagan calendar in connection to our ancestors, color symbolisms of the Slavs, an initiation as a rite of passage. So I found out that color is like a big deal in Slavic tradition, and I'm sure it is for many different cultures, but I found it really fascinating to compare what color meanings mean to them versus like color meanings that I would associate with. So it's very interesting. It talks about different rites of like death and different wedding. Oh, I remember this. So weddings there are actually considered a funeral for the bride, which I found really fascinating because usually you would think weddings are this joyful event, but in this, it was almost like it wasn't. And so it was a completely different way of thinking about weddings, which was kind of interesting. And I hate to say it, but some of it did make kind of sense because it's like girls are being almost kind of uprooted from what they've known all their life and thrown into this new family. And I don't even get me started on the topic of like name changing and everything, but I feel like that's so true in the world today. I feel like we're starting to evolve more from like the olden days of the very deep rooted traditions of women have to change their names and all this kind of stuff. You see more and more that women aren't changing their names. And from my point of view, it kind of makes sense, you know? Like back in the day, I hate to say it, but women were kind of treated like possessions. They were just objects to be obtained. And when they did get married, I mean, they had very little rights and they were kind of just, I mean, there was a reason wedding vows had you will be obedient in it. Like, I'm sorry, as a witchy feminist woman, that there's no way I would agree to that. I love my husband to death, don't get me wrong, but I'm very independent and I'm not going to say that. So, and changing your name, you know, you've had this name your entire life and then all of a sudden you're just supposed to get rid of it. And you know what happens if your father, like mine, had 3 daughters and his family dies out because he didn't have any sons? Like, that just, to me, it doesn't make sense. I could ramble on about that all day, but you don't want to listen to that. So we're moving on. It talks about different standing water and endless cycles, magical properties of water, crossroads, intersections, clean and unclean dead. Um, so this one does touch on how Christianity is the most powerful form of a cult, and I'm Christian as well as wanting to dive deeper into folklore and my Russian roots. So I feel like, you know, a lot of things that Christianity, I mean, I won't lie, they have stolen some things from the pagans, obviously. A lot of holidays, for instance, Yule, Christmas, Ostera, Easter, a lot of those things are derived from pagan culture and religion. But when the Christians came over, the church wanted those people to convert over. So they had to make things very similar so that they would fall in line. But today, I feel like you can still pull from a lot of different things. Like I still love working with angels, and and I still believe that there are saints and things that can help us. I feel like there's a huge realm of entities that help us, and it doesn't necessarily just have to fit into one religious belief. Um, Take that as you will. I'm sure there's people that are going to disagree with me, and that's totally cool. I'm totally down for people not agreeing with me. Um, but that's kind of how I see it. I may not be specifically Catholic, but I still believe that there were saints that lived and they are spirits that can help you. Um, and, angels out there that are willing to help, and other entities that, spirit guides and animal spirits. And I feel like you can, without, being inappropriate about it, there's things that you can learn from every culture um, that are fascinating and represent the higher realm of spirits. So they also talk about burial rites, um, the enchanted word, relationships between folk prayer and spell, which I love, because incorporating like that folk magic into your spell work, and I feel like it has such a deeper rooted like influence, and that you have so much more power behind you because you're asking your ancestors to help you, and I feel like they're a very powerful source of magic um, to draw from. And then it also talks a little bit about Haitian voodoo, which I think voodoo is such a fascinating subject. Um, Hoodoo and voodoo are different. So, kind of like Wicca and witchcraft, you have your religion, which is voodoo, and then you have hoodoo, which is more of like a magical practice. Same as Wicca, which is a religion, versus witchcraft, which is just a practice. Voodoo is it's passed down from generation to generation and has stayed very close within a family. So to learn true voodoo, it's secretive, and it's most likely you're not going to learn those secrets because it's kept within the family and the ancestry and practice, which I honor. I think that's really cool that they stay within their knit community, and that it's a practice tradition that falls down from family member to family member, and it's an honor. It's an honor to practice that. And so, you've got to respect those traditions. But what I can learn on it, I like to, just because I think that's an amazing religion. Like, I think it's so deeply rooted in family. And I mean, what more powerful magic can you get than from love and family and ancestors? So this book I really enjoyed. If you want kind of just a history on ancestry, I mean, even if you're not from Russian descent or practice voodoo, um, I still feel like you can get a lot out of this book. Next, in the same realm of history of ancestral magic, I got Baba Yaga's Book of Witchcraft, the Slavic magic from the Witch of the Woods, Madame Pamita. This woman is cool. Like, her books are really neat, and I love how this is kind of told within almost like a Cinderella-esque story. So you follow this folk story of this girl, and she has to go get like this fire from Baba Yaga, and she is like an entity or a deity, I guess, who is a very powerful witch, and she's kind of scary, to be honest. Like, she's not like this pretty witch. I mean, she's down, earthy, bugs, will sacrifice you if you aren't within your right to be there, or if she doesn't like you. And so she kind of gives this young girl, different tasks. And then you learn about the different deep rooted, like Slavic traditions, which is really interesting because I loved learning about it in this kind of way. So it talks about the Vidma, which is the witch, and the forest and animals, and you know the hut and the altar, and each section of different different meanings of witchcraft and the magic words. And so this was really an in-depth book that I really enjoyed, and gave a lot of, like, even things about the bathhouse and like different spirits and entities that you can connect with, um, that are common in Russian tradition. It talks about the waters of life and death and bones. So I really did like this book. I thought it was really cool to learn more of the history and ancestry of like Russian tradition, Slavic folklore. So definitely recommend that book if you're looking to deep dive into Russian folklore. Next is this one, The Green Wiccan Herbal, 52 Magical Herbs Plus Spells and Witchy Rituals by Silja. I'm really sorry, I probably mispronounced that. But this is a really awesome little book that has like 52 different herbs and plant allies. This book is super easy to read. It has different spells in it as well as the ingredients for those spells. But it talks about, just very briefly, like what the plants do, what they can help you with physically as well as like spiritually and magically. And this is just a super simple book, but it has a lot of the main like plants that you would work with. Because, you know, with an apothecary, you don't need a huge apothecary to work with. You just need, you know, certain herbs and allies that maybe can work a lot of different ways. And I also love how they split these plants up into the elements. So like air, water, fire, and earth elements. So if you're wanting to incorporate the elements as well, then you can use these different allies for these different things. They talk about like what planet it matches with, as well as like the deity it goes with, as well as its magical and non-magical uses. So I really like this book. This is a great little book. Like, I feel like there are just massive amounts of like huge herbal books, and you can kind of get lost in them. So this is a great book. I think the last one I'm going to talk about today, because I've literally been chatting for 42 minutes, is Of Blood and Bones, and by Kate Fruler. And this is working with shadow magic and the dark moon. I really like this book. This book, although you can't see it, I did write like a lot of notes and stuff in this. This talks about like the nitty gritty, like the darker side of magic, and she doesn't shy away from it. And it's great to see, because witchcraft is not always about light and, you know, happiness, and we manifest, you know, love and hope. That's not always the case. I'm not saying to always just resort to dark magic, and I don't even like using the word, well, I guess I don't like using the word black and white magic. I'm sure every other witchcraft person here on YouTube says the same thing. I just don't think we need to classify black and white like that. It's no. But I do feel like there are like darker and lighter magic. And so it talks about using bones, body fluids, you know, some of bugs, some of the nastier things in witchcraft that can also pack a powerful punch. And she, like I said, does not shy away from this. And she does go into ethics and whether, you know, if you're not okay with that, different substitutes. For instance, even if you're like vegan, she talks about different plant allies that you could use instead. But if you are vegan, this probably maybe isn't the book for you, because it does go into detail about, you know, animal bones. It even talks about, you know, the use of human bones back in the day and sacrifice. And, you know, she's not obviously telling you to go out and sacrifice a human being, but other different kinds of sacrifice that you could give to honor a deity or, you know, help in manifesting a spell. So, and it uses the lunar cycles and gives, you know, specific materials for different spells. And yeah, there's a whole section on bugs in here and how you can use bugs. And gathering and cleaning bones, like literal, like in-depth conversation of how she, will find dead animals and she'll bury them and let the bones, you know, come forth from the skin, and how she cleans them and uses them. And it's, being a vegetarian myself, this should gross me out a lot more than it did. But I've also come to kind of take a different spiritual outlook on life. And I mean, the earth is about life and death, guys. Like, this is not a mystery to us. And being able to still embrace, like, I used to get so grossed out with, dead animal skulls and stuff. And now I actually, like, have some over here on my shelf. And it's not, I don't like hunting. Like, I don't like fishing. I don't like hunting for the sheer sport of just going out and killing something. But I can respect the way, like, the Native Americans did it. They used every part of the animal and they honored the animal. And I think that's something that we lose a lot nowadays. We think everything's at our dispense, and that's not true. And so when I do have animal skulls, it's to honor them or to have something physical where I can tune into their spirits. Because, I mean, yes, their spirit is gone, but parts of that is still within the animal, and I can still honor that animal in that way. And I have a very deep connection with animal spirits, and that's usually how the universe talks to me, is through animals. So it's just a different perspective, different way of looking at it. I understand some people just flat out aren't going to be comfortable with that, and that is totally cool. I totally understand. If you don't like gross stuff, this book is not going to be for you. But if you aren't afraid to kind of deep dive into some of the darker side of magic, and just to understand it, even if you're not going to practice it, just to have an understanding of it, I think it's really important to know. It even talks about, like, crystals and some of the darker sides of them. You never think of crystals having dark energy, but just like anything else, there's a good and a bad side to things. So how you can use those. It talks about, like, hair and fingernails and how you can incorporate that into your spells. And it's more about taking a part of you to make that manifestation even stronger. So it's not necessarily like you're always doing bad things with these things, but I mean, this book is not flowers and rainbows. I'm just flat out telling you that now. It's just not. But it was very educational, and I really enjoyed it. And yes, it talks about cursing and other magical manipulations. Like, sometimes these things I feel like are needed. For example, if your sister has a stalkerish boyfriend, you might just want to do a banishing spell or a hex or a curse to maybe get him to move on. It's not something I just, and I know my channel is called The Hex Witch, but contrary to popular belief, I don't do tons of hexing. It's just, these are good things to know in case a serious situation ever does occur, and love and light is not going to get the job done. So really enjoyed this book. I think this is definitely a 5-star read. It's got nitty-gritty information. It's got everything. So definitely give it a go. If you're looking to explore the darker side of magic. So I have a couple other books here that I might just mention really briefly. I'm not going to go into in-depth information. This one I've already talked about, The Witch's Guide to the Paranormal by J. Allen Cross. 5-star read. Absolutely recommend this. This is fantastic if you're a witch as well as you're interested in the paranormal. It goes into lots of in-depth information about different spirits, how you handle them, exorcisms, different ways spirits enter into your life, agreements that you make with them, whether you know it or not. Totally a great, fantastic read, and really gives a new perspective on spirit work. I also read A Complete Guide to Fairies and Magical Beings by Cassandra Eason. I find spirit, like fae, very fascinating, but I'm also very cautious about that because I have not really gone deep into fairies. I feel like I've had people tell me, like spiritual people tell me, I may have a little bit of like fae personality. So I'm interested in learning about them, but I do not have any interest in working with them until I really have a in-depth like understanding of them, because their ethics, the way they work, is very different from the way we work, and it can be very easy to piss them off or for bad things to happen. So this book is a good comprehensive guide. It talks about elementals, the origins of fairies, who are the fairies, evidence of them, nature spirits, like I said, divas and elementals, fairies and earth energies, the darker side of fairies, powerful fairies, and just in general what they are. And so I definitely enjoyed this book. If you want a start on understanding fairies, A Complete Guide to Fairies and Magical Beings by Cassandra Eason is a good start. Lastly, I read this little book, The Zen Out Guide to Understanding Auras, Your Handbook to Seeing, Reading, and Protecting Your Aura by Cassie Yule. This is a great book if you're wanting to start doing aura work. I'm trying to understand auras even more so, and it's a very nice comprehensive guide of how to read them, how to understand them, what different colors mean. They even have a test to determine kind of what yours is probably going to be. An aura color quiz, what they call it. They also go into each color and like what different stone works best for them, as well as kind of what that color like means, whether you're kind of a chameleon of sorts, personality-wise, different protection tools that you can use for that color, different stones, different activities that would kind of help increase your aura, all these different things they talk about. They talk about empaths, different boundaries to set, how to, protect your aura, how to heal it and cleanse it. Like, for instance, going to an energy worker, sound and healing, chanting, food and hydration, visualization, breathing techniques, herbal smokes, all the good stuff. So this book is really cool. We don't realize how much energy affects us and how much our chakras are in play with the rest of our body. So I feel like it's really important to have a good understanding of that if you're going into energy work. And that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for sitting here and listening to me babble about a bunch of different books. I hope you enjoyed the video today. If you did, please leave a like or consider subscribing. That helps me a lot as I start my journey on YouTube. If you have any questions, comments, leave them down below. I'm happy to hear from any of you, and will answer any comments that I get. So for now, I hope you all stay happy and healthy. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and I will see you next time for another video. Bye.